So in the last video, this is part 3 of the discussion on free will. This one's called A View Beyond Time, and that's what we'll mostly be talking about. In the last video, we covered an overview of the history of free will and determinism, and then we began looking at analytical definition of free will that was separate from the historical assumptions that have been made around it and what it's sort of been associated with. If you listen to that video, which you should before you get into this video because this is the middle of a discussion, you might react saying that that was sort of a parody of the free will position, like just saying like, oh, I can't fly, so I don't have free will. That's not really what free will people are claiming, so that's not what it is. It's like you're missing what free will is saying. And yes, that's true. But my point is that the term free will is what brings up that parody. And the reason why people arguing determinism have been responding in the ways they've been responding is because free will, whether intentionally or not, entails some things that are clearly not true. It pushes the idea that we're disconnected from the world, and the determinist's best point is no, we are connected to the world, which we are, and we should be, and we want to be. So again, it's the term free will and some of the ideas that have been entangled with how it's been interpreted that have made it into sort of a parody of what it should be. It's not a good term for expressing what supporters of free will actually want to suggest, is my point. Saying my decisions are completely free and self-contained and determined is a different claim than it matters what I do and therefore how I think. My consciousness is significant, right? So determinists have a valid criticism to say that your decisions are at least very heavily influenced, right? But many determinists, at least those not fully captured by nihilism, can still see that our consciousness is significant, and we'll come back to that at the end. But my point is we need to distance ourselves from the inaccurate term free will and speak more clearly about what we actually believe and what we actually want or hope to be true in when we're supporting the ideas behind free will, and that's what I'm working towards. I also, in my last video, brought determinism's greatest critique, in my estimation, to the fore as like a lead-off of a discussion, and I only hinted at its failings. So some people might listen to that part and think that I'm really a determinist after all. First of all, as far as I know, my wording of that determinist point as to the necessariness of our connection to the world, our will's connection to the world, and therefore the world's influence on our will, and that this is a necessary element of significance, that's something that I don't hear any determinists pointing out. A lot of them actually present their positions in at least with the foolish addendum of saying, and therefore we actually believe that humans are robots or humans are piano keys, as Dostoevsky was rebelling against, and that these determinists, oh, we're just the ones with enough sense to accept this grim truth. And some of them even outright deny significance in life in general and the insignificance of choice, the insignificance of consciousness, even though if you're looking at determinism, that doctrine is exactly what provides for significance. So there's plenty of like nonsense and confusion and failure on both sides of actually talking about reality and talking about it in a way that can reach someone else. So moving into this video's material, it'll be important to grasp a distinction between a determinism which says that human beings can or could predict all human actions. Like human beings can view other humans as piano keys, as the mechanisms of a machine, and based on data that humans and or computers can gather of the past and present, they can predict completely accurately the future. That's one section of determinism that would be sort of a human predictive side of things. So like we can predict human behavior completely. There would be another type of determinism that would be distinct from that, which comes from the idea of God, essentially. We're going to talk about it through this lens because that's how it first came up. That's how I think of it. But you can just treat it as a thought experiment of a supreme view beyond time. It would get into some technical difficulties if we were talk about multiple universes or something. But anyhow, just an all-encompassing view beyond time. It could just be a thought experiment. I'm going to use the word God, but in your mind, if you need to, just call it a thought experiment. A determinism which comes from that angle and says, well, our future is known. Outside of time, God or the outside of time observer can see what I'm doing tomorrow. Therefore, my future is known. That's another avenue of where determinism comes from. And I think they're actually distinct for many ways. And we're mainly going to talk about the latter in this video, the view beyond time. That's the title of the video. But from this side, you don't have to weigh in on the abilities of prediction on the determinism front of like, can human action be predicted from the past or not? So you can actually be agnostic on that matter, even if you were deterministic on the matter of seeing the future. And you can, even if you believe that human action was predictable from the point of view of God, like if you're like, well, if for whatever reason God wasn't just going to look ahead, even though he can easily see, does God have enough processing power to make a prediction from human past to human future? Is it a program in that sense? That's kind of an angels on the head of a pin question. It is an angels on the head of a pin question, but you don't have to weigh in on that. And you don't have to affirm it or deny it and say, well, it is a program. And you also don't have to weigh in on the ability of humans to make that. Or you could have differing views of like, well, God could do it and humans could do it. Anyways, so there's a lot of openness on that side of the equation of like, you can recognize a view beyond time, but that doesn't necessarily entail all these other elements of determinism, though it could. So we'll talk about that a little bit at the end as well. But we're mainly going to focus on the idea of an objectively existent future and a perspective beyond time, because this has the it's one of the ideas that fuels a lot of determinism, and it's also one we understand the least, in my view. And so there's sort of the most ground for benefit if we can start to understand it and see where I think we're messing up in some ways. I think I can show that. So there's the most room for growth and progress along that view. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And it turns out the idea of the predictability of people's actions really doesn't require that much address. So we'll do it at the end or near the end. But we're going to talk about the view beyond time now. The idea that the future already exists. So, I mean, the first thought that usually comes to mind is if the future already exists, then I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. And my will has no effect because the future is already there. So notice the underlying distress there is I'm not significant if this is true. If it's true that the future already exists, then my decision-making process is insignificant because I'm already going to do whatever I'm going to do. This is exactly the scenario that Leibniz was responding to. And honestly, if you want not to watch this video anymore, all you have to do is meditate on Leibniz's response, because he gets it nail on the head. Without considering what you cannot know and can give you no light, act according to your duty, which you do know. There it is. That's the rebuttal to determinism. Now, if you get bothered by, more details and someone's like, well, maybe this thing or maybe that thing, if it doesn't resolve it for you, probably just need to meditate on it longer, but we can discuss it further because I enjoy it as well. But I still think Leibniz really had the best response. So the problem with dealing with this view of the future and of an existent future and a view beyond time, it's really just in our limited perspective. We don't understand a perspective outside of time, but we're trying to hypothesize one and talk about what it entails and implies. So when we have errors in our picture of what a perspective beyond time is, then that leads to erroneous conclusions about the implications and entailments. Going back to affirming sort of the purpose of this and the reason why I'm doing it, what we want to know is that we're significant. That's the value behind free will. And it's the value that people feel threatened in these discussions. We want to know that we're significant, and we want to know that we have more than just one path into the future. That's the thing that really bothers people, and like, well, God sees your future outside of time. And then they're like, well, then I'm just locked in to one thing. And that really bothers people. We want to have more than one path. We want to have multiple possible destinations that we can actually pursue and like actualize and reach, because if we didn't, our effort and attention would be insignificant, and we don't want the insignificance, we want significance. So determinism in either the predictive form or the beyond time form bothers us because it suggests that we have only one definite path that is inescapable, or at least that's how we interpret determinism. And that's how some people who are sort of like the worst advocates of determinism say that what it means. We want a multitude of choices, though we really don't know what the satisfactory minimum of choices would be in what situation. Like maybe there's a situation where only 2 or 3 options are really viable, but that's still not complete determinism. So is that good enough for us? Who knows? And that's, sort of an angels on the head of a pin question in that, how would you know if you even got it right? So anyhow, we want multiple choices and multiple outcomes, therefore, which are affected and determined by our consciousness, including our reasoning and imagination, which would then affect our action and our path and choices. So at this point, we can say that there's actually a distinction between choice and free will. They're 2 separate things. Saying that we don't have free will is not saying that we don't have choice. Although another way to say this would be, if it's really your only definition and the only presumption you have around the term free will is that free will means we have choice in our lives, then we do have free will in that sense. And you don't have to be bothered by any of the determinist arguments, because none of them are saying we don't have choice in the way that I'm going to define and explain choice. At least none of them are accurately saying that. So determinists should be able to see this as well. So in order to define choice, I'm going to do it in kind of a weird way, and I'll explain why. But choice in this, in the way I'm going to put it, is not so much a particular thing or a thing that you do. It's just the reality of multiple potential futures, multiple paths that you could be on. This may seem odd, as many people think of like the ability to choose as really central to their being, but there's a lot of problems and complications with that view, which are going to be beyond the scope of this video. But when you get into meditation, if you get into meditation and some more religious philosophies, even some non-religious philosophies, the questions of identity, such as who am I, what is it that thinks, and even meditations on the process of a thought itself, like trying to follow the question, do you choose your thoughts? These things kind of throw a big wrench in the gears of the ability to choose. There's a really good video on that. I'm not going to get much further into it, but it's by Rupert Spira, and it's called "Do You Choose Your Thoughts?" And it hits that nail on the head. Maybe not in a good way for those who are really attached to that idea of choosing your thoughts, but you don't choose your thoughts. So anyhow, that's a complicated issue. If that's something that bothers you, then you need to go down the route of questioning about identity and where that comes from. Again, my book, Purpose and Form, The Necessary Basis of All Ethics, available on Amazon, will help with some of that, especially in terms of preserving the significance question. It's not a dedicated address to the identity question so much. Jnana Yoga, my first book, would be somewhat applicable as well. But there's plenty of material on that from people like Rupert Spira, Alan Watts, Buddhist philosophies, etc. Even Christian philosophy has it in there. They just don't focus on the identity issue too much. Anyhow, because of all those complications, I don't want to say something that's clearly going to conflict with those. So again, choice in this sense that I'm using it is really just the openness of potential, the reality of potential, and the fact that multiple potentials could be manifest, and ultimately one will be, but it could have been another one, kind of thing. So it's not very clear to say we have the ability to choose once you've gotten into these other philosophies, but we can say that there are multiple possibilities that might manifest themselves in our lives, and we ultimately end up on one of these paths and not on the others. And our desire and methods of conscious attention have some effect on the direction we take. I'm not saying that we can just, again, I'm not saying we have complete free will and we can just say, well, I want to be rich, and boom, I'm rich. I'm not saying that our consciousness input isn't limited and that we have some reflexive reactions and we have the limitations of having to eat and all this other stuff. There are limitations on it, but I am saying it is significant. Our consciousness, our thoughts, our attention, our effort we give does have some effect. That's a key point, and it's a significant effect. Even if it's a small amount, it's still a significant effect. So the fact that there is a reality of actualized potential from a set of varying potentials, and that this is to some degree affected by some of our consciousness, and then through that our physical input, we call this whole encapsulated reality, we call it choice. And that's what I'm going to refer to it, because I don't have a better singular term to indicate that gobbledygook, but nevertheless, it's real. It's real that we have multiple options, and that we will find ourselves on one of those options. and that finding ourselves, which one we find ourselves on, is influenced by our consciousness to some degree, to some significant degree. Free will, on the other hand, is the idea that our choice is a magical, miraculous outcome of a completely disconnected and self-contained process. Like, no, there's no effect of the biological drives of hunger, thirst, need for shelter, need for security, not having death anxiety. All of these things limit our choice and therefore determine it in some way. Free will in the form we've been talking about of just like an analytical definition is the idea that our choice, it is like an I choose my thoughts kind of thing. Like, I can see all of the options out before me, and I'm just gonna like completely independently select one, and boop, that's what I got, and that's what I get, and yay, everything's great. That's not how it works. We don't have this kind of free will, as we've said, and we don't want it, again, because we want the effect of acting on the world, and therefore being connected to causation, and therefore influencing the future, and therefore being significant. And we want to have the input of the world so that our actions can be effective and appropriate. We want to know what's necessary. We want our actions to be appropriate for the moment, for what they're trying to produce. If you don't have any inputs from the world, then your actions in the world aren't going to be informed in any way. So we want to be connected to the world in that way. In order to have the potential for making the best possible choices in the world, we cannot have free will in the analytical definition of it. Again, this isn't denying significance. This isn't taking away the things that you actually want. You want to be connected. You want your choice to help shape the future. That's all retained and even enabled by getting rid of this idea of like a fantasy, free-floating, self-contained will, if you could call it that, whatever, that's not what we have. So as a side note, just like a detail to address, in the podcast I mentioned in the first video between Lex Fridman and Joshua Bach, whose name I probably mispronounced, Friedman brings up the model, they're talking about free will. Friedman brings up the model of consciousness used by Jonathan Haidt in his book, The Rational Mind. This model is of a monkey and an elephant. The monkey is the rational mind, and the elephant is like everything else in our decision-making and biological process. And the reality that Haidt talks about is that the elephant is really in control and the monkey has limited input, but mostly the monkey is there to find ways to justify the decisions the elephant has already made. So he's kind of saying we're mostly irrational. Friedman in this podcast seems to suggest that free will is or should be the monkey having like complete control or almost complete control over the elephant. And this is reflective of like the middle ground for modern people to come to, which is sort of distance from the typically religious idea of free will, but not completely like nihilist, crazy determinist position of like the insignificance of our consciousness. And it's like the worship of rationality of like what free will is and what free will should be and what we're aiming for is that monkey, the rational mind, just being in control of absolutely everything. There's a lot of problems with that view. We're not going to address it in detail other than to say that's not the path you should be going down. You're barking up the wrong tree. Haidt addresses many of the problems in his book, including like the necessity of irrational motivations and valuations that are not made by the rational mind, but which give the value for the rational mind to move off of. Like you need your emotions and you need your values, which are determined by irrational processes, to make the efforts of your rational mind valuable and worthwhile. On top of that, it's just generally problematic to say that we're like one part of our being, but not the other part of it. We're just the rational mind and not the rest of the mind even, or we're just the mind and not the body. So we just shouldn't be doing that kind of thing of like this weird dualism. There are some times when dualism is helpful, and it's helpful to recognize there's like a phenomenological experience of dualism that we can address. But ultimately, the body-mind is a cohesive thing. There's a lot of problems with dualism. So we're not going to imply this conception or sort of any form of it. And even outside the sort of deeper philosophical issues, thinking our lives would be better if we were just completely rational, and the rational monkey had complete control of the elephant, which is like the rest of our body and mind. That's not actually something we should want. Again, go to Jonathan Haidt's book, the righteous mind, for that discussion. And also, I don't know how he equates that with free will, but that's not what free will is, even I would think under most conceptions. Anyways, getting back on track, free will has been understood and developed in a way that I think can be encapsulated in this phrase. Free will is the ability to surprise God. That's something that I don't think someone was like, oh yeah, that's what it should be. I think it just sort of incrementally became that as the propositions of determinism and ideas about a view beyond time came about. People changed their view of what free will was from just an explanation for why we are responsible and why there's evil in the world to like why we're significant. And I was like, well, we're significant because we could even surprise God. So there's an example, an illustration of this that I like. It's from a Futurama episode called Godfellows. And Bender meets God and they have a conversation. And Bender's like, well, if you're God, do you know what I do tomorrow? And God says, yeah. And Bender is like, well, what if I do something different? And God's like, well, then I don't know that. And it's comical because there's the implied philosophical contradiction of like, that doesn't work, but you're just going to God's just going to brush it off. He's like, well, then I don't know that. Anyways, I like that scene a lot. I like that episode. But this idea of being able to surprise God and be like, well, if I do something different, then God won't know, right? And the ability to alter an objective, externally existent, already existent future that became entangled by the evolution of the thought around free will, became entangled with our belief about our significance. And so it's like, if God already knows our future, how are we significant? Because our future's there, we're there, nothing's going to change what's going on. And there are a couple of different ways to look at that. Some people have retreated to the position of like process philosophy or process theory, where the future doesn't actually exist at all, which again, I talked about last time. Relativity kind of challenges that a lot, as well as just sort of basic physics. There's no reason why we would think that we can see, other than we don't want our future to exist before we're there. So it's causing us a lot of problems. If we cannot surprise the future, or we cannot surprise God, then we must be insignificant. They're saying, well, God's seeing what I'm doing tomorrow. I haven't got there yet. But if it's already there, then my getting there is irrelevant. I have no impact. I'm not significant. Can we come back to this fear of, this means I'm not significant. So there's a disconnect of how to accept the reality beyond time as someone who passes through time and feels like their choices are significant and really wants their choices to be significant. Fortunately, the issue is we just don't know what we're talking about. Since we don't see beyond time, we end up confusing ourselves and bringing in time concepts to an image of a view that's outside of time. We're projecting our own understanding, which is time bound, to something that's not time bound. The middle ground, where we get to keep everything we wanted, which is the significance and the significance of our choice, is that free will, in terms of surprising God, cannot exist by definition and does not exist. However, it's also impossible for God, looking at you, to think that you are insignificant to the production of the world and the production of what you would call your future. That's just an erroneous thing we've projected there, and we'll show how we can come to understand that. It's likewise impossible for God to look at you as though you're like slow getting to your destination, as though you're lagging behind, like he's ahead and you're behind. And it's impossible for God to miss the interconnectivity of causality in which your consciousness operates, which is what leads you exactly where you're going. God, in a view outside time, would see exactly the significance of you making your decisions all along the way is you inputting causes that are contributing to the line of causation which takes you into your future. So we tend to think of God, if he knows the end, why not just save me the effort of going through all that? That's just missing the basic point. So going back to the quote from the first video from the religious song, and it's really just a religious trope, my fate was decided so long ago. In the Bible, it talks about plans from long ago. There it is. Plans formed of old. This is the way we've understood destiny and confronted views beyond time up to a point as a species in our history, but it's actually just wrong past that certain point. And because it has the concept of time implied within it, things like God already knows, or long ago, before the end, all of these imply time and separation and distance. From a view outside of time, there is no time. Everything is present. Everything is currently occurring. So God is viewing you today with the same unified present consciousness that is viewing you tomorrow. There's no separation or differentiation between the two views. It's not, I'm viewing you here and then this is a sequence. I'm looking at you here and then I'm looking at you here. That doesn't apply outside of time because there's no sequential differentiation. There's no separation. That's a time sequence of this and then this. That doesn't apply outside of time. So both are viewed completely equally, but simultaneously. There's no way for me to illustrate that because I'm within time. So there can't be an idea from God's perspective of you falling behind or taking too long to catch up or get somewhere. God doesn't see your life as a pointless rerun of a movie that he's already seen, where he just like waits for you to get through it so you can finally talk about it at the end together. The word omnipresence, it means each moment is equally present. The concepts of the end, the beginning, long ago, before, after, already, these all imply time. So it's not the case that your fate was decided so long ago. Again, the Bible refers to plans formed of old, before creation, all this stuff. But creation isn't old from God's point of view. It's all new and completely present. The new day, the new creation is literally all of creation, and it's literally today, the one and only day. So it's the unitary, simultaneous view of creation. In the Divine Comedy, when he's in paradise, one of the angels, I believe it's Beatrice, essentially his muse, and the spirit that saved him. Scripture condescendeth to your understanding. And it talks about, well, it describes God as having hands and feet, but he doesn't have hands and feet. Like, it's just saying things in a way that you might understand it. So the same thing with these time-based phrases. People talk about them all the time as though they're like, as though they're the gospel, the absolute truth. It's like, well, they don't apply at all to God. They're completely wrong in that sense. They're one way for us to understand them, but they also bring up stumbling blocks for us when we have to move past them to consider a view beyond time. So these time-based phrases are a way of trying to convey a reality beyond our conception, but they're incorrect and they fall short. So it's not as though at the beginning God looked ahead, which would be within time and distance, toward the end, again, time, separation, distance, and saw all that was to come, noted it, and that would be a sequence of events. Again, that's implying time. And then God can recall any of the events at any point because he has already time seen it and has a perfect memory. That's sometimes, if we had to explain what our thoughts about God were, a lot of people would come up with something like that, but that is completely off base because we're just projecting our ideas that involve in time constraints to something that's outside of time. So God just sees presently, sees everything. So the reality is your fate was not decided long ago. Your fate is decided in the now. And this is what you want. This is what you've always wanted, is for your future, your fate, your destiny to be met and made up by the decisions that we make in each present moment. That is what's true. And it's also true from God's point of view. It's not true from God's point of view that he decided way back then and you're off just running through going through the paces of what he's already set. And he's like, well, he'll get through it eventually. No, it's all present. It's all now to God. So it's also true to God. God would look at you and be like, yeah, your fate's decided in the now because everything's now. You're experiencing it one slice at a time. He sees it all at once, but it's still all now. So in either case, your future, your destiny is decided in the now. So God sees all nows and all decisions, in each one leading you to the next and adding up to your path through time. That's exactly how we experience it, except we don't see it all at once. So this view beyond time doesn't take away the significance of our choices in the moment. It just confirms it. So there's no super being sitting at the beginning who's already seen through to the end and is thus disinterested in your late pointless progression through what he's already been through and seen, and is just, and now you're irrelevant. The seeing of the entirety of all creation is all simultaneous and eternal. So there's no, I've seen it and now I'm done with it and disinterested in it. So this is how the view of beyond time, that line of thought, really encompasses and surpasses the predictability hypothesis of determinism. Again, you could go into the angels on the head of a pen question of well, could God predict human behavior if he didn't see their future? whatever. And who cares? I mean, if you're, whatever. I'm just not going to address it. There's no need to predict if you can simply see the future beyond time. And yeah, so this also hammers home the impossibility of surprising God or surprising a view beyond time, because it's not like, oh, someone was trying to predict and then you did something else. Whoa, who could have seen that coming? It's like, well, even if I do something crazy, unexpected 30 seconds from now, someone that sees beyond time sees me doing that thing in that moment. So it's not a surprise in the sense of you surprise the thing who can see everything, but it still could be very creative and ingenious, especially compared to humans that are also in time that can't see beyond time. So it doesn't take away from the significance of ingenuity and creativity. It's completely irrelevant to that. It just means there might be a view beyond time. It doesn't take away from anything of significance. So yeah, I mean, a view beyond time literally sees what you do in the future. It's not Bender being like, "Whoa, what if I do something different?" If you did something different, that would also be seen and known. So anyhow, a view beyond time sees you now doing what you're doing in what you call the present, and sees that how that leads to your future through all your decisions and all the things that happen to you, to the next moment or next day. And then it can see you also present in that what you would call a future time, using all your conscious powers and what you would call free will to make the decisions in those moments that lead on to more moments. You're always in each moment doing the things that you think of as free will, and all the things you want to do. You're making significant choices at each moment, and they are causes that go into the world that make up at least part of your path and direction. So that's all preserved. The significant choice is still there. None of this makes your choices insignificant. It is your choices, your actions, which entail your thoughts and your conscious attention, etc., in each present moment that lead to the next present moment. Of course, there are outside influences and etc., but your consciousness has a significant impact on it, and your choices have a very significant impact on the future. Different actions would lead to different outcomes. We know this, and I'll get to that in a minute, but that's the real simple debunking of like threatening determinism. So the connection of causality that determinists harp on, they're like, well, we are connected to causation. The world affects us. It limits our will. We can't fly. We are affected by hunger. All these kind of things, and even to greater extents, we have predispositions in our thought and personality. Yes, that's all true. And determinism is like, we need to recognize this. Yes. But that connection to the world, the connection to causality, and the fact that your mind can interact with the circumstances of the world, that's exactly what makes your choices and your actions and your consciousness significant. That's exactly what allows you to who are you changing it for? Changing a future for yourself, yes. Not surprising a being outside of time, but that's irrelevant. You still picked one future over the other. It means that your consciousness and your choices have real effects and have real consequences and really shape the future. That's what the connection to causality assures. That's what the good part of what determinists are saying is. We should be able to accept that. Yes, exactly. We're connected to causation. So as an example, I had to order a textbook right before my class starts tomorrow, actually. I needed to get here in a couple of days, so I paid for expedited shipping. I chose to pay for expedited shipping. I thought about it and I was like, oh, it's like pretty expensive. So it's true that this action was determined by many factors, such as I chose to look ahead to the start of my class and make sure I had everything I needed. I thought I had an e-text that would work. I checked on it. Turns out there was a problem with it. I was communicating. I emailed the professor and I was like, hey, what's going on here? And through starting that process early and doing it, I got to the place where I was like, oh, there is a problem. I need to rectify that. So I had the time to order the textbook and get it expedited and get it here on time. It's here now. I have it. I've already started reading it. All of those decisions made my future different than what it would be if I made different decisions, right? That's all undeniably real. Like, again, you could also say I'm determined in the sense I can't just spontaneously manifest a textbook. Okay, right? Fine, I'm determined. I'm a human. That's great. But I could have responded differently. I could have responded to the anxiety about the course by just not looking at it, not looking ahead and being like, oh, I'll just deal with that next week. And then I wouldn't have known that I was actually going to be missing a textbook on the first day that I absolutely needed on that first day, or even before the first day. And I could have shied away from emailing the professor for not wanting to seem unsure or overeager. You know, I could have not confronted my anxiety or backed away from it. I could have decided to pay for normal shipping and hope that the package actually arrived on the day that they said it would, and then just tried to play some quick catch up rather than pay extra for faster shipping. You can say that all of those outcomes were influenced and determined by my previous learning, thinking, conditioning, as well as biological makeup. Like maybe I have a predisposition to confront anxiety more than other people. Fine. The reality is I acted in a way which affected my future. If I had acted in a different way, my present and my future would be different. You can't take that away. That's the reality is you make decisions in the world which are at least in part influenced by your consciousness, and they have significant impact on the world. That's not going to go away. So if you make an effort to grasp this, the explanation of the views beyond time and how we need to get out of our habit of projecting our own time-bound principles to a timeless point of view, you have to work at it. It's like, say in CBT, like you have to notice when you're having a thought that you have been instructed and come to realize is erroneous. You know, oh, that's me applying time to a non-time entity. That's a mistake. Or like that's me overgeneralizing, or that's me, you know, whatever the other CBT cognitive distortions are. You have to notice it and then you have to edit it. You can't just be like, well, I thought about it, I agreed to it, I nodded, now I'm going to go on with the rest of my life and I'm not going to be bothered by determinism. No, you have things running in your head that say deterministic things and bother you. You have to go in there and be like, nope, 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 and undermine them and take them out. If you do that, it will resolve the perceived problem of you being insignificant because your future is already known. Your future is known, but it's not known before you're there. It wouldn't be your future if you weren't there. You exist in the future, being you and making your choices, exercising your free will and having your significant consciousness and all that. Any further issues around this that aren't solved by the practicing this understanding, there's another issue tied up with it that would be that we touched on earlier. Like you're going to be bothered by ideas of how do I exist in the future if I'm not there yet. You need to go to the who am I question, the identity questions, and those would answer more of those problems. But in terms of the problems around the significance of choice, this does take care of all of them. So to reiterate, free will being about surprising God or not surprising God is completely irrelevant to your significance and shaping your future. So there's another aspect of free will and some determinist thoughts that I haven't addressed yet, and that's the issue of predictability, the complete mechanical determinism of like everything, and those have implications on responsibility, which is another thing that bothers people. So going back to the example I gave of ordering the book early, some might say that my decisions were all determined to the point of being predictable beforehand by a powerful enough processor combined with enough data. The implication here is that I have no control. Regardless of the potential choices that I can theorize, I will be biologically and physically forced to make only one of these choices. And it's irrelevant whether I could see what it would be, or if I had thought of others and not thought of it, I would still make that choice. Or if I had thought of only it and not others, I'm still going to only make that one choice. Saying my consciousness is irrelevant, and by extension, I am not responsible for my decisions. The real underlying claim here is sort of there's no you that decides. And again, your consciousness is irrelevant. There's only a biological machine executing a program. This aspect of determinism, as I said at the beginning, only needs a very brief reply. You can spend for years in like interminable thought experiments of what would I have done if I had thought of something else? Like, what is it the Oracle says to Neo? What's really going to bother you later is, would you have broken it if I hadn't told you to watch out for it? Something like that. So, but the solution to these endless wheels is pretty simple. You're just being fooled by a confident statement that really can't be stated confidently. There's a lot of top level scientists that talk all the time about determinism. I just watched a video. It's produced by Big Think, and it's called Who Controls Your Mind, or the Free Will Debate or something. It's got like Bill Nye and Daniel Dennett and people in it. You can find it. Most of them are saying, yeah, definitely determinism, you don't have free will. So a lot of like smart scientific people, yeah, we figured it out. You don't have free will. You're like, wow, dang it, I don't have free will. And you buy it, and this keeps your thoughts spinning like, oh, I guess I feel like I have free will, but I don't. I don't know how to stop feeling that I do, but I did. It's just this game, and it's only your doubt of yourself and your belief that they must know what they're talking about that keeps it going, because it's pretty easy to get out of this trap. So first of all, your thoughts clearly affect your life and your choices. The reason that humans are such a different species from all the others is because we can think and implement our ideas to such a greater degree than any other species. If our thoughts were irrelevant in our decisions, then we wouldn't be a remarkable species. So your thoughts and your consciousness are very clearly significant and have enormous impacts on your life. You would not be living the life you're living if you didn't have the consciousness you had. And again, in this example, someone's bothered you by saying, your consciousness is insignificant, you're just a program. Someone else's thoughts and their action of them has influenced your behavior. So clearly your thoughts in general can have a significant impact. So, okay, that's one level. And then a person who's on this team of like crazy scientific determinism might say, yeah, but your thoughts and your reactions and your non-reaction to other people's thoughts are all just as determined by predispositions, biology, and physics as your actions and your hunger and everything else. So it's not just that, of course, your thoughts have and your consciousness has significant impact, but it's not really your consciousness. It's just an irrelevant program that's going to go on no matter what you do. So you're irrelevant and you're insignificant, right? But that's just simply unsupported scientific hypothesis. We don't currently have the ability to predict real human behavior. And we're not anywhere close. Creativity is a part of human consciousness, including thought, and creativity is something we have no idea how to model. People who think creativity is just a program machine thing that is irrelevant, they're making a faith-based claim, and they should be required to substantiate it and prove it. As to date, creativity and modeling human consciousness has been the cornerstone of failure for AI. We have no idea how to do it. So people saying, it's just a program, it's modelable, it's predictable. There's no evidence for that. You can believe that there will be someday, you can believe that we'll get there, but that's just a faith claim. That's just, yeah, I think it's probably just a program. That's all it is. That's all anyone's saying. If they're saying that your consciousness is insignificant and creativity is not a significant factor in thinking, influencing your life, and it's not responsive to training or to effort, to meditation, whatever. It's like provably wrong. We know that meditation, we know that creativity is effective in lives. People who are smarter live different lives. Like people with higher IQs live different lives than people with lower IQs. People with more creativity live different lives than people with less creativity. These have significant impacts. And things like meditation, things like just general training change your outputs. They change your behavior. So again, like you can try to get behind all that and say, well, even that's just ultimately what you're saying is if you're saying, well, even that's just a program, that's just predictable, that's all you're saying is, oh, well, that's just insignificant. That's the claim, that your consciousness is insignificant. That's just that's an outcome of modern nihilism. It's a philosophy and it's a faith, and it's asserting itself in this place where, come in through an argument, everything else sounds scientific, but that's not a scientific claim. That's just a faith base, that behind everything there's no significance. That's what the claim is. There's no significance. So again, my book, Purpose in Form, The Necessary Basis of All Ethics, available on Amazon. That's sort of the core approach of this book, is to refute that claim. Is that you are significant. We can prove significance, we can know significance, and we can see why and how these claims of insignificance are coming from, or coming about. So what this means is, as far as best scientific information right now is concerned, including philosophy, etc., neither a human being nor a computer will ever be able to accurately treat another human as a piano key, as Dostoevsky was saying. You cannot look at a person as an entirely determined and limited in output mechanical system. You can say maybe we will someday, but that, again, that's a faith claim. If you want that to be your faith, you can choose it, but it's not anything other than a faith claim. And the idea that creativity is real and effective is supported. So we are just too complex to predict. Again, in this Big Think video, Steven Pinker's like, you can't predict human consciousness. Joshua Bach, in his podcast with Lex Freeman, he's saying it seems undeterministic because it's unpredictable in a space of too many parts to count. Again, it's too complex for us. So even if you want to say, well, it's too complex for us, but it's still a program, there's no way that you can know it. Because if you could know that it was a program, then you could figure out how to program it. But we don't technically know whether it's a program or not, but there's no reason to assume that it is a program until we prove otherwise. I mean, that's just should be the basic assumption and hypothesis, and if you want to prove otherwise, then do so. And if you want to assume otherwise, then do so, but know that that's an assumption and a faith claim, not a like scientific, yes, we're determined, everything's programmable and your consciousness is insignificant. No, that's faith. Anyhow. So we are not, fact, we are not predictable from a human or computer level. Again, that's why the weird AI bots that try to mimic a human say really weird things, because they don't work, because we can't model a human behaving in an infinitely complex world the way that it will, because it's not as simple as a program that we can possibly grasp. So that's just where we're at. We can be known outside of time and therefore possibly predicted in that manner. It's not predicted, because again, pre is like before, that's implying time. It's just, you can, if something is outside of time, it can see the future and the past simultaneously, all as the present. But that's distinct from saying that we are an unalterable program which is unaffected by conscious input. In fact, conscious input is what changes lives. Meditation changes lives. Religious experiences, and I'm not saying like dogmatically, religious experiences change lives. I'm saying there's scientific literature that studies religious experiences, and they have a proven positive outcome. Like you can more or less objectively define the concomitants of a religious experience, and you can say, you can evaluate people, oh, did they have that? Okay, then what happened? And they're correlated with a positive outcome. So religious experiences change lives for the better. We can't explain what it really is if you're a scientist and you don't believe in it, but it's definitely a phenomenon that happens and definitely has correlative effects. So again, conscious change changes lives. Just mundanely, planning and making well-informed decisions changes lives. Being able to not be impulsive and practice ways that control impulses, these change lives. It still remains true that there are all sorts of influences and limitations on this process. I can't fly. I do have biological needs. I do have predispositions. But the middle ground is not anywhere near your consciousness being insignificant, nowhere near your efforts being insignificant. All of those things, your consciousness, your efforts, your thoughts, and ultimately how that influences your actions are significant. You are determined in that sense. You are connected to causation as you want to be, and you are significant. And you have creativity and imagination, and you have multiple paths to choose from, and you're going to be on one of the paths, and it's going to be in some way influenced by your mind. Your consciousness has a significant and compounding effect on your life. So anyone who claims the insignificance of consciousness or the completely determined nature of creativity, or that is human consciousness as a whole, no matter how confident they seem and how well qualified they may be, at this point they're selling snake oil. And you have to wonder if they really believe that everything's determined and no one is really responsible or significant in their consciousness in any way, and you can only do what you were programmed to do. Do they really believe that they're only doing what they're programmed to do? Do they react to people who don't believe them as though those people were insignificant and they're only the victim robots programmed to be wrong and couldn't be anything but wrong? Are they like at peace with disagreements? Don't they believe that telling people that they are programs will help or be effective in some way, will do something for the people if they could just accept it? I mean, why make the effort if it's insignificant and the outcome is determined anyhow? Of course, you can remain consistent in that position by just saying, well, yeah, I'm programmed to be inconsistent. Okay, well, anyways, on that line and spotting that pattern, again, check out my book. It addresses a lot of that. In claiming that a reality beyond time exists and there's a you that exists in the future is not in any way taking away significance of choice or the significance of your consciousness. Again, there are problems that will come up around there about the nature of identity, which aren't fully addressed in this conversation. So you could still be being perturbed by those sort of thoughts, but there are paths that can address that. So anyhow, your significance is safe. You are significant. You are significant, and your choices help shape the future. That is what we've wanted when we defended free will. The significance of our consciousness and the significance of our choices and our ability to shape the future. It's still all there. No matter how much determinism you allow, it's still there. You can claim that once we allow determinism for creativity and all our entirety of our consciousness, that's going to go away. But again, there's no evidence for that, and there's a lot of evidence contrary to it. So that's just a faith thing at this point. We don't have free will. We don't have free will in the analytical definition of the term free will. Determinism is true in its claim that we are connected to the world, but that's what we want. And we can be seen beyond time, but we are still significant, even from that view outside of time. It just sees us being instruments of connecting to our next future through our choices. Like, you're choosing one thing now that leads to the next thing, and it's seeing all these things that are connected causally. That doesn't mean that the causal connection isn't there. No, you see the causal connection and you see, oh, those choices led to those things. So again, your significance in the moment of choosing different options is exactly what creates the future, or at least helps create the future. So a view beyond time doesn't not see that. It sees that even more clearly, that your connection and your function within causality is part of the causation chain that leads to the future, or that particular future. So those of us who believe in the ideas and the values behind free will, we can safely meet determinists halfway and not be anxious about losing anything. The only thing that we really lose is a phantom reality of like a disconnected will, like a really free, completely disconnected, ineffective and unaffected will, which we don't want, because that wouldn't work for us. That's not what we want. We want to be connected. We want to be on both ends, open to the effects of the world so we know what's going on and able to affect the world. So we want to be integrated to causation. On the other hand, determinists can then be less annoyed by the irrationality of the response they get from free will people and get an affirmation of their real evidence of like, yeah, the world has effects on us and we have predispositions and this, that, and the other thing. Sure, that's all true. And then we can have a more productive conversation because we're not losing the value of significance and we're not worried about that. And so we don't have to like irrationally defend it. We can accept all that. And, well, you still have to differentiate between the determinists who are merely pointing out our connections to the world and bodily limitations, which is all good, and the versus the ones who are completely captured by nihilism and probably misanthropy to an extent. And more than likely, whether they admit it or not, are just sort of like getting off on saying grim things that bother other people, and thinking of themselves as like, well, I accept the grim reality, so therefore I'm superior. Well, you're only programmed to be superior, so you're irrelevant anyways, so under your own philosophy. So I don't know what consolation that is to you, that you're better than other people since you're not a person and you're insignificant and whatever. Again, my book takes care of that nonsense in a much more complete way. Even still, despite all the difficulties of the discussion, working towards understanding can bring a resolution. It takes a lot of effort to work at understanding a perspective beyond time and to deconstruct our erroneous projections of like time implications onto what's outside of time. And understand that really that's the only thing that's causing us these issues of like, oh my gosh, it's someone seeing the me that exists in the future, like takes away my significance. No, it doesn't. Not at all. You're just projecting that. So you can get beyond that. It's possible, but or at least to get significantly better at it, to be much less bothered by it. So it's worth working on.